So thank you all for being here today for week 1 of the Online Organizing Academy. As I mentioned, we're going to be covering listening. But just to describe a little bit, what's the purpose of today? So we would like to offer options for engagement that are easily accessible and then can help build digital organizing skills within our audience, while also building community. A big part of this is you're going to be going through these 4 weeks together as a group. We ask that you all take inventory of the people that are on this call, see if you recognize anybody. Feel free to reach out to people because this works best when people are connecting separate from us, and this is a very kind of self-propelling process. So feel free to check out. We're going to be doing some breakouts later by region, so you'll get to know some people in your area if you don't already. I encourage you to take inventory of who is there, and feel free to reach out after these calls. So the structure of this course, we're going to be doing 4 weeks of live webcasts with recordings available shortly after. There will be also a written resource guide available after to help guide you through some of the information that we covered. As I mentioned, we're going to be going through this at kind of a brisk pace because we have a lot to cover. So the webinars will help you in being able to revisit this material and go through it at your own pace with a written resource guide as well. If you're on the phone, if you would like to unmute yourself, just a note, please dial *6 to unmute yourself on the phone, okay? And so back to it. Get back to my slides. We will be covering best practices available for online organizing. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to be covering how we organize in Sierra Club and what are the tools that are freely available to you online that you can use to organize on your own with other advocates. So next point. In going through this journey together, we're going to be using the Sierra Club organizing model of listen, learn, share, and build. So today we will be covering the listening portion of that. So in setting that up, we're going to be covering how do we set up meetings, available resources for listening online. How do we even listen online effectively? There's so much information out there, but there's some really key tips we want to give you to kind of help hone your listening skills in a very powerful way. And finally, how do we listen first, act second? Well, not finally. How do we listen in an equitable and just manner? Why do we have to listen in an equitable and just manner? And then finally, what do we all want to get out of this training? So that's going to be a big part of this, is that the feedback we get from you all as a group is going to help us in the material that we are going to be teaching to you. It's going to help us identify the areas that are of most need and the skills that people already have. That's going to create an effective group for us. We're effectively plugging people in and utilizing those skills, and then building skills for people that don't have them. So to start off the process, I'm going to turn this over to my cohort, Zach Kopkin, who is the organizing manager for Sierra Club. So Zach, if you can just go ahead and share your screen, feel free to take it away.
Hi, folks. Are you able to see my screen right now, Gonzalo?
Yes.
Okay. If anyone has any trouble, please put it in the chat.
I see the full screen though.
If you could just see my screen now.
I see the screen, but it's also the screen and the slideshow. There you go. Perfect.
All right. I am so happy to see so many faces on the call today. I think you're really going to get a lot out of this. And y'all are from all over the state of Florida. And I think we're going to be able to come together and find a lot of solutions, bring up a lot of great questions, and be able to connect to solve a lot of the problems that we all care about as Sierra Club family members. So first, I'm just going to teach you a little bit about how to use video calls. This is a burning question for a lot of folks right now. And these are just some basics. This is me, Zach Kopkin. I'm a digital organizer with the Beyond Coal campaign within the Sierra Club. And I am based in North Carolina, and I work throughout the Southeast. So video conferencing, it is definitely a unique experience for folks to whom it is new, yet a lot of things about it are familiar. A lot of meetings are being moved online, so it's important to think about how we create the kind of community that we'd want to create anywhere and to do that online. So successful video conferencing is not just about the software. Try not to get too overwhelmed by the technical things. What's most important is the state of mind that you bring to meetings, being present with each other, the norms that you create to be able to communicate and share and connect. And when we're thoughtful about how we use video conferencing, we are able to foster dialogue and listening and use those to change things in the real world. And that's what this is all about, this training for the next 4 weeks. First, you want to make sure that you're in a position to succeed, to be effective, and to accomplish the goals, whatever they might be, of your call with other people. So you want to treat the space as if you are in person with other people. Anything that you would be doing in person with someone else, you would like to do on a video call as well. You don't want to have your email up, things like that. Try to make eye contact as best you can. And that takes getting familiar with these kinds of tools and being understanding of the learning process and getting comfortable with them. It's important to be comfortable in whatever space you're in. Try to be somewhere quiet if you can. If you have your email open right now, hopefully you don't need to be looking at it for the next hour, so you can close that and make sure that you're getting the most out of this. Try to make sure that maybe you've brushed your hair today, or just you feel good. You try to make yourself presentable. That's not the most important thing in the world, but it does help you show up in the way that you want to. And also, you can take notes on paper. You can do whatever you need to do to stay focused. And if that does mean getting up and stretching, or looking away from the screen to rest your eyes or anything like that, that's perfectly acceptable. And it would be in real life as well with people who you trust and respect you. Y'all are welcome right now at this moment, if you'd like, to go into the chat. Get used to using the chat function up in the top right of your screen. If you move your cursor around for a second, that'll pop up. You can use the chat, tell other people what tips you have to make sure that you look good on camera. And I have illustrated here in a picture just one. If you have the screen kind of below you, and I know I'm not doing this right now, but you'll look a whole lot better if you're at eye level, and you're gonna be able to make better eye contact, and also it's a whole lot better for your neck. So share those tips with each other. And how we set the tone for meaningful connection on a video call. One, if you can, have your video camera on. That's really helpful. But of course, we need to be understanding of each other as well, and whether we have internet access issues or anything else, any other reason we'd like to keep our camera off. It's important to allow time for questions, and we've built time in for that, as well as other ways to engage with each other, and to engage in different ways throughout this call. And when you do have a question to ask or anything like that, you can type the word stack into the chat, and it will create the word, the words will stack up as if you're raising your hand, and that can allow someone to call on you rather than typing in your full question and distracting others. The chat box can be used for all kinds of things, and we make sure that we go over norms. Gonzalo did a great job setting the tone, I think, and showing folks how to use the chat, where to find buttons on here, making sure you're muted, those kinds of things that allow us to talk one person at a time. And yeah, I don't think there's more to say about that. I really, really want to highlight this resource, which you will receive in your written resource guide. It's called Leading Groups Online, from two really fantastic experts. And here's 4 key points that they share. 1, practice the technology. So if you're going to host a call, just take a little bit of time and get used to it. There's ways to do test calls with Zoom, with Google, with other technology. Engage frequently. That means to make sure that you're not talking nonstop without ways for other people to actually have a back and forth. You want to manage the energy in the room. You want to, like Gonzalo did here, have some music, make it fun, make it something people want to be at. And very, very importantly, don't expect everything to be perfect. You might have a little glitch with the internet. Your computer might restart and update in the middle of a call, Don't beat yourself up over that kind of stuff. It's just a part of being human together. And they have a lot more tips in this written resource guide, as well as ways to do interactive activities together, just like you would in real life. Some tips here about privacy and security. Y'all might be hearing about some potential concerns around privacy and security on video calls. One thing that Gonzalo already did here, he mentioned that we were recording this call. So if anyone just joined, you don't want to be recorded, you can turn your video off. The chat is also recorded, so just keep that in mind. And Google Hangouts and Google Hangouts Meet, which is the business version of Google, they automatically send invites to people, and they create a phone number, which is really great and an important thing that we did here to make sure that it was accessible. When you're using Zoom or other features, make sure that you're aware of the different security settings they have. You can just Google those or ask us if you happen to have any questions. Avoid reusing meeting rooms. You can have the exact same URL for a Zoom meeting over and over and over again, and that makes it a little easier to hack. So make sure you're generating a new one every time if you happen to be using Zoom. Make sure that you're not letting other people share their screens, things like that, because they could put stuff up that you don't want to see. So as you're setting it up, make sure you know who's coming onto the call and that you have some limitations on that. And I have a great link here from UC Berkeley that'll be in the written guide with more steps to keep your calls secure. And this is my final slide here for you. Just letting you know there's all kinds of different ways to use video calls. You know, I'm sure you've heard of FaceTime and Skype and these kinds of things. So these are just 3 others that are really popular and very simple. And my greatest recommendation to you is just to keep things simple. Use a tool that you're comfortable with and that is accessible for others. You can see here some of the characteristics of these. Google for free, you can have up to, I believe they bumped it to 250. So that is a real plus there, although you cannot record it and it does not create a phone number if you have a free Google account, unlike this call we're on right now because we're using the Sierra Club account, which we pay for. Zoom is fantastic. It has more features than Google does, but if you have the free version, your calls will be cut off at 40 minutes. And then there are some other great things too, that there's a whole wealth of features, but you can recreate just about any of those things in a less high-tech manner like we're going to do today with Google to keep it simple for folks. And then Cisco WebEx is a little more secure, but you know, I hear from folks that's a little clunky. It's a little outdated, but it is kind of an industry standard for hospitals and big businesses that are making sure that their information is encrypted. If you'd like, at this time, you can use the chat box, tell folks what other programs you like, share links, things like that. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it along to the next presenter.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate that. So now we're going to have Diana Umpierre with the Sierra Club also presenting. Yeah, feel free to chat in your favorite video types of conferencing. I know also for people that don't have computers, Facebook Messenger offers a video conferencing feature as well as WhatsApp. They have smaller size limitations, but you know, if you're trying to do it on your phone, those are other options as well. And as Zach mentioned, there's going to be a written resource guide. We're going to be sharing out, kind of comparing these and letting you know, so you can revisit this information. Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate it.
Okay, give me 1 second to figure out the button to share my screen.
It's in the bottom right? Or is it
Yeah,
present?
the problem is that the chat is in the way. So
Okay.
I'm trying to get the chat out of the way.
We'll let you figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, now I see it. Okay. Okay, give me 1 second to figure something out over here.
No problem. While you're figuring that out, I'm just going to go through the chat here. So I see a lot of people like Zoom. Zoom has some great features, as we mentioned. You know, you can do breakout rooms, and you can also do poll questions. Those are a little bit extra than you have to pay for those features. In this training, we're trying to highlight resources that are free. One thing you can do with Zoom is you can do 40-minute calls for free. One kind of life hack you can do, let's say you have a call that's going to go over 40 minutes. You can set up back-to-back Zoom calls that will be 40 minutes in length, and that way you can just hop from one to the other. That's one kind of interesting life hack if it's worth using anything.
Okay, I have no idea if my screen is
Yeah, we can see
showing
it.
up. It is? You guys can see it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right, well, thank you, everybody. Sorry, this is like such a weird way to, but I love seeing faces, and if I haven't met you, I hope I meet you soon. I'm in South Florida work on Everglades and Resist Campaign. So I'm going to share a little bit about, how we use social media for listening. And I have to say that, a while ago when social media was becoming popular, I was very resistant. I eventually got into it mostly to monitor my son, who was a minor then. And since then, I've gotten, obviously hooked up. And one of the things that I do almost every day, almost every morning, it's, start my day by listening, trying to figure out, where people are at, the latest and stuff. So, so I'm going to just share, a little bit. One of the things that I share on the Google, on the chat, was a document that I had put together to kind of summarize just a little bit of what I'm going to present. I'm going to then do some interactive things as well. But think about the larger picture. What is it that we want to, when we use social media for listening, right? And social media can be Facebook, can be Twitter, can be Instagram, and there's probably other people who use other systems, right? So what is it that people share? People share information, right? Things that they know. They share their opinions. They share their biases. Even the biases, even biases that they did not intend to share, right? They share their emotions. What are the things that are their interests? Events that are going on in the community. So there's all kinds of things that people share. There are also things that are implied, that are not straight shares, things that are more statistical, like by looking at, but they tell you something, right? The number of hits that something has gotten, the number of likes, or the number of hates. All those things tell you something about two things. One is about how people are reacting to what is being shared. But it's what the other thing that it's also doing is also giving you a sense. For example, if you're the one who's sharing something, it gives you an idea of how effective it is for you to be sharing this. Do you share it effectively? Do you share it the right time of the day? Do you share it, do you share too much information and people have to scroll? So all of those things, even just what images you're sharing, there's different kinds of reactions. So all of those things tell you about how people are reacting. So I, on my end, I know when I do listening, I look for all of those things, how people are reacting to things, the things that they share. And then I ask myself, well, who is it that I want to listen to, right? There are times that I obviously want to listen to my friends, to my family, but within the context of organizing, I'm also listening for who might be potential new volunteers that I might be able to recruit. Who are people who I see taking initiative to do something, and that gives me a sense for potential people that may develop into leadership roles. And so I listen for that, to try to figure out people that we can bring into the movement. I listen to our targets, decision makers, people that we want to influence, what officials are saying, both those that might be doing the right things and those that are not, what government agencies are doing, interest group. And I also use it to listen to the opposition. I work on Everglades issues, and as you probably all know, Be Sugar is very active in doing all kinds of things to on this issue, and as well as some other corporations that are sometimes trying to influence things. There are times that they form, Facebook pages that are kind of fake. I call them kind of front groups that kind of show up and they share misinformation and stuff. So I listen to that as well. But I also listen to who replies, who, for example, if somebody's sharing some misinformation, I share for who's falling for it, as well as who is challenging it. And usually those that are challenging it are giving me a hint or potential people that, that we can bring into the movement, as well as people that seem undecided, right? Sometimes you can tell that, by giving them extra information, they become more aware and may change their mind on something. So anyway, so those are all the different kinds of things that I share. I don't know if you can see on my screen, but let me see if I can do this real quick. But one of the things that I do, I don't know if you see my screen, you see Google? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, we see it.
So writing here on my browser, for instance, one of the things that I do, you see this little folder that says opposition? You guys see it? Right? It lists all kinds of things in there. So that's one of the things, for example, that I do when when I follow things on social media. I don't want like all this opposition stuff to show up automatically in my feed. So what I usually do is like I put them all in bookmarks, so that then if I want to go and listen, if there's a particular reason why I need to listen to what the opposition is saying, so I can be very prepared to deal with those issues, I can use that as a reference. So I'm going to share just a little bit I'm going to go online a little bit in here, tell you a little bit, for example, on Facebook. I'm guessing most of you use Facebook. If you don't, that's okay. That's not the only social media platform out there. I also want to recommend that, just like with anything else, there are some people who it's probably not a good thing for them to be on Facebook, right? If they have, addictive tendencies, it might not be, if you can self-regulate yourself, it might not be a great platform for you to follow. But if you do, Facebook is very popular, right? So, for example, in Facebook, I'm right now in the Sierra Club Florida page. I'm not going to scroll through the whole thing, but for example, I look for things like, what are the things that people are reacting most to? And I know every time that we post something regarding to the toll roads, that's usually one of the higher hits that we get. And even in the midst of the coronavirus and all these things, I'm seeing a lot of reactions to this issue. I look at the things that people post, their comments, the concerns. And again, the same thing. I start to get a feeling for who are the people that are opposing this issue. And sometimes I send them personal messages to see if maybe they would, join some online action, or if we need them to participate in a public meeting, I contact them that way, or just do a reply and kind of try to establish a conversation and engagement with them. The other thing that I use a lot of Facebook, obviously, other than my personal feed and my friends, and it's groups are great. Some obviously are public, some are shared. This particular one that I'm looking at is a mutual aid group that has been formed in South Florida by people who are trying to mobilize resources and help their neighbors. So again, once again, I get to learn not only people that I might have never met before. I have established like brand new friends, and some of them have become like really, really, really special people in my life through interactions in these groups. Sometimes they'll post something environment related. For example, on the coronavirus things, people are seeing the relationship between air pollution and in the ability of people, some people get more sick than others. And so sometimes people post on those issues. And again, I get, even though they're posting primarily about the coronavirus crisis, I'm also learning that they care about environmental issues via some of the things that they post. So that's one example. And then this is a public group that is also being done here in South Florida. This one happens to be started by Sun Sentinel, our local newspaper. And again, same thing, great place to make connections and to listen to people. One of the things that I found really interesting in this interaction was when we were dealing with the with the port, the Port Everglades, and we had people that were coming in. I got to learn about, how people react to crisis on these things. So anyway, so much for Facebook. Some of the things that I could share is, and this is kind of in this document that I had shared with you, and for sake of time, I'm not going to go through all that, but I just want to at least make you aware that there are things that you can do in your Facebook profile to make sure that you're not overwhelmed and that you're seeing things that are more relevant to you. Things such as, making sure that, your default, you turn certain notifications off and what you see first. And I also get to learn about other groups that I may want to join via groups that my friends are part of. I also get a chance to, use the search screen. So if I want to know what people are, if let's say that you're working on a wildlife issue, butterflies or something, or Florida, and you want to know people that care about that, you get to interact with all of that. So anyway, so that's that one. So I'm going to turn next to talk a little bit about Twitter. And just by a show of hands, those of you that are sharing your lovely faces, how many of you use Twitter? Nah. Now, let me tell you, there is a certain person that loves to Twitter. He's in the White House. And why do you think he tweets so much, right? He tweets because he knows that that's where the media lives. He loves to get media attention, even from the fake news, right? He loves media attention. He also loves to influence, get other influencers engaged. So this is why I'm going to go a little bit over Twitter and how you can use it for listening, realizing that it's probably one of the most underused platforms for just regular activists. Just because we're, for whatever reason, we tend to go more into Facebook and stuff. So, so Twitter, I'm in Twitter right now. This is my Everglades Twitter account. And let's say that I want to know, and I think I put that example in here, Marco Rubio, I want to know what his latest, what he's tweeting about. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see, unfortunately, you see this guy shows up, sorry. I'm going to put Marco Rubio. Hold on, it should show up. And, oops, sorry, I'm going to do a little bit more. Give me 1 second to do this right. Computer is acting a little slow, so apologies. I'm going to go, I'm sorry, not much. And I'm going to type in, I'm going to just do the same thing I did on my example here. And I think I did climate. And I want to see what he's, the tweets and things. And what this will do is going to show me, for example, people that have tagged him and things that they're saying about climate change, right? And so in this case, I'm not going to go through all these things that are showing up in here. It's interesting that I type Marco Rubio and climate, and I get a thing from ExxonMobil. It's a sponsor thing, so it's odd. But anyway, so I get a sense, based on what he's saying, what things I can pressure him on, right? What things, I need to challenge that he's saying. As well, I'll also learn how people are reacting to the things that they're saying. And again, through those interactions, I get to see who are potential influencers and potential new people to bring in to our movement. On Twitter, one of the things that you can do that makes it a little bit easier to manage, besides using, being able to do searches, is I use lists. So for example, in here, I created a list that has for instance, this list over here, Politics Miami-Dade, right? And this list, if I was to look at it real quick, okay, if I look at who are the members of this list, okay, in this list, I follow several commissioners, some city commissioners, some mayors, basically people of political influence, okay? So if I want to know what is it that these people are tweeting about today, I just go through that list, right? Instead of just going at my regular timeline, right? So I could see what are the things that they're doing. Other list that I have is on media. What is it that the media is paying attention to today? And so I go in there, and I have, I think, Sun Sentinel, and if you look at the ones that I have there, I have some reporters, I have some several news outlets and reporters. And again, from what they tweet, it gives me a sense for what are the things that they're, that raise their attention. It also gives me an idea to know who tweets the most and see whether those might be people that, if I want to share something that Sierra Club is doing, I can probably tag those reporters and get their attention. And often, if you haven't noticed, when you look at news articles, you often see in the news articles little clips of Twitter's stuff, right? So you know that they're looking at Twitter feeds and inserting that into their articles. So anyway, so that's just a quick overview of Twitter. And I included some additional information in this document to give you some additional ideas on things that you can do. One thing that people don't realize a lot is that they can do advanced searches. So if I, sorry.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have to wrap it up here because we're running.
Sure. No problem. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no
so
problem.
let me just finish up. The other things that you can do, LinkedIn, sometimes I use it quite often to make connections to grassroots people, right? People of influence or even potential donors, often tend to use LinkedIn quite a bit. And there's other things out there, there's Meetup, there's Instagram. So all of that to basically say, you do, depending on the audience that you want to get, if you want to get young people are saying, I may go and check on the social media that I know most of the young people tend to use, and Instagram tends to be very common. If what I want to do is connect with people in my own community, say that I want to get my city to commit to a Ready for 100 campaign, and I want to engage my neighbors, I'll use Nextdoor to get a sense for who in my neighborhood is really interested in this issue and engage them. So I hope that gave you a kind of a general overview. And the last thing I'll mention is always protect yourself in social media. You never know when somebody can just screenshot something you say or share. So I always say never share on social media something that you wouldn't be willing for a reporter to put on their news. And avoid getting trapped by social media. Sometimes you could spend way too long in it. So take care of yourself, and when you're finding yourself trapped in it, take a break from it. So with that, I'll give it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Deanna.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a lot of information presented. As Deanna mentioned, she shared the resource guide that you can look through. And also, we're going to be sharing compiling a condensed resource guide with some of the links that she shared to kind of help you with your listening. Hopefully you learned some new tips there from social media. I know many of us spend a lot of time on social media, but I didn't even know some of the features there with searching and such with like on Twitter. So hopefully that was useful for you all. So next thing we're going to be discussing, let me just get back to presenting my screen here. Okay. So how many people here have used Google Forms before or created surveys online? By a quick show of hands. I see a couple of people. Not a lot of shaking the head. No, great. So that means y'all will be learning something new here. Well, before we get into that, I just want to share some quick research hacks. So a lot of us use Google, but a lot of us, this might help you kind of up your Google game and help you be a better researcher. So one thing I like to do is I add PDF to my search. So for example, if I'm looking for like scholarly articles or written reports or fact sheets on information, I'll just type in .pdf into my search and it'll return PDF files for me. So just to give you a quick example of what that looks like. I want to look up, here at Sierra Club, we focus a lot on this power plant, Big Bend, down in the Apollo Beach area. This is owned by Tampa Electric Company. It's a big coal unit that they're changing over to gas. So in doing the research for this power plant, I typed in Big Bend power plant, pollution, and then .pdf. So this very quickly gave me results. This nice result here from Scholarly Commons. This is a research article from a professor from USF that I used a lot of this information from this. It details a lot of health impacts, a lot of regulatory history around this power plant. This was a great resource for me in doing my research. Another thing you can look at, there was another report here I saw. Well, you can see here EPA violations. Here's another report here from Environment Florida, America's biggest mercury polluters, where they cite that power plant as being one of the biggest mercury polluters. So again, I highly recommend adding .pdf to any search you're doing to find official resources and official links. Again, just because it's a PDF doesn't mean it's always going to be official, so you have to fact check it, make sure that it's legit, but this will help guide you to some good resources. Another thing you can look at is US Census data. We have a slide here in a little bit where we can show you an example. But
yeah, and I can give them, if there's time, I can give them a little.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rush through it here, so I'll just
no problem.
I'll just give a quick summary of it. Census data is really good for finding out demographic data, income, racial, high school education levels, tons and tons of information you can find from census data to help inform your organizing. For me, for example, I was looking at the Apollo Beach community again because they live right next to that coal plant. Thinking it's next to a coal plant, I'm thinking it's going to be like typical frontline communities around this country. It's going to be, typically working class, typically more people of color in there. But what I found interesting enough when I started looking at the U.S. Census data was that the houses in that area are predominantly Caucasian, predominantly affluent, either middle class or upper middle class, and houses around $300,000, $400,000, which is not what I expected at all for people living next to a coal plant. So just, I highly recommend if you're going to be looking at doing any organizing in any area, look at census data to help inform your organizing. You might find some things in there that you didn't realize were the case. And another great tool I want to hit on is ArcGIS. I won't do a super deep dive into this, but if you haven't looked at ArcGIS, this is one of the most powerful tools out there in terms of research. Basically, there's mapping data out there that you can look up and you can find all kinds of information. And we'll do a quick demo here. So if you go into ArcGIS's website, you can type in a search for poverty in Florida, and this will bring up some maps that show you different levels of poverty. There's one specifically on migration for Puerto Ricans in the United States. I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, I won't be super long here, but I want to show one map, how coronavirus is making ArcGIS much more important, and how people are using COVID data to inform their organizing, and they're building really robust maps that can help us understand the situations. So this is very high level ArcGIS skills. I wouldn't expect anybody on this call to be able to produce something like this, but you can, over time, learn how to produce things like this. And the great thing about ArcGIS is that you have data that can be layered on top of other data. So while we're looking at things like case data for Tampa, we can layer that over things like income levels or single family household density to find where are the hot spots for where people are going to be the most needy and where should we be focusing our organizing efforts. We've done a lot of this with the local disaster resiliency initiative that's going on in Tampa. We use a lot of the mapping and a lot of the data that the county's been producing to identify some hot spots of areas that lack shelter coverage could use some help in bolstering their resiliency. So again, this data, the fact that you can visualize the data in a map and really quickly analyze places of power and places of weakness is a hugely, hugely powerful tool for organizers and advocates alike. So I highly recommend, if you ever get a chance, just play around, do a Google search for ArcGIS and play around in there and see what information you find. And if anybody wants any more information on that, myself and Deanna is a much more expert on ArcGIS. She actually used to do ArcGIS work for Miami-Dade County. Feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we can, help guide you through some of the information that we know. So here's an example of some census data. I won't spend too much time on this, but as you can see, there's a lot of detailed information on all kinds of things from people. If you ever want to learn more about your own community or a community you're just curious about, I recommend going into the census.gov/data.html and playing around with some of the data that's in there. Okay, so if you have any questions, please remember, feel free to chat them in and we will get to them at, when we can. So I asked before how many people have actually used a survey online. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's SurveyMonkey. There's the one we're going to use is Google Forms. So again, just to make it easy for us, we just have one Gmail account and then we can access all these different tools. Before I show you how to set up an actual survey, I'm going to just talk about some quick best practices. So you want to make sure you have a large audience. If we were to survey 10 people in a room on what their favorite food is, that might be different than if we surveyed 100,000 people. So make your audience as large as possible to eliminate biases and make sure that you're getting an adequate sample of what the audience you're looking at would want. Make sure it's easily understandable. I've seen some surveys that run 3 pages and have 15 questions on each page. I always wonder in the back of my head how many people actually completed that survey. Tips I can give you is that if it's more than 3 to 5 questions, most people won't complete it. So try to make sure your survey is easily understandable. You're not putting in a lot of jargon that requires defining, and that it's not super long. Open versus closed questions. You want to put your closed questions first, the easiest questions. So things like name, phone number, address, email, things that are easy to answer, they don't take a lot of thought. You want to put those first, and then put the more open questions like, what are your opinions about this training? Or, what are ways that we can make your life better? Those types of questions, you want to put those towards the end. People are going to require more thought for that. You don't want to scare people off with open-ended questions at the beginning of your survey. And as I mentioned before, shorter is better. Not just for the length of your survey, but for the actual link of your survey. If you have a short link, it's easier for people to remember it and easier for it to be shared out. We're actually going to show you in a little bit how to create customizable short links so that you can then just quickly share that out with people and make it match whatever branding your campaign might have. So now we're going to do a quick demo on how to create a survey. So the first thing we're going to do is open a new tab. So if you want to join along with us, feel free to do this. Open up a new tab. We're going to go to forms.google.com. So that'll take us to where we can create surveys. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to see this. This is the top of your screen. If you go to forms.google.com, you're going to click on that box right there that has the rainbow-colored cross in it, and that'll open up a blank survey for you. So let's just go in there and let's play around with it a little bit. So in here, you can create the title for your survey. You can add questions to it. You can do a bunch of different things. I'm going to actually go back and show you a survey we already created so that we don't spend too much time creating this stuff. But you can create questions like name, phone number. Some features you can do I want to highlight is that you can make your question required by clicking on this tab here. It by default is on not required. So if you do want to require it, just click on there. Just some tips on surveys. This is how you define the type of question you're asking. So for some things like name, phone number, short answer is fine. We just want a short blank. If it was like a open-ended question, we want it to be like a paragraph. So we make that a paragraph to give people more time, more room to text. If we wanted to do something like a multiple choice question, like the ones down here, this is a checkbox question. So you would just, instead of going to short answer or paragraph, you go down here to checkboxes. And there's also multiple choice. One, just to distinguish multiple choice from checkboxes, multiple choice only allows you to choose one option. Checkboxes allow you to choose multiple options. And yeah, so as you can see, we have some questions here. You can do some other things in there, like you can customize the theme. By default, it's not going to have this, rainbow candy on the top. We put that in there to make it look fancier, but you can customize. If you click here on the little paint palette, it'll pull up your side panel, and then you can customize theme by color. You can change the font of your theme. You can, make it more formal, make it more basic, however you want it to be. And then, yeah, so if you want to preview what it looks like, you can click this eyeball, and that'll show you a live view of what it looks like when you send it to people. So this is what the form actually looks like. So once you've created your form, as I mentioned, we're going to create a short link to make it easier to share for people, see for people. So, well, before I get into sharing it, I just want to show you once people complete your form, you can click here on your responses tab, and I have a slide here for this actually to save and view your responses because all right, you got the survey out, but now you want to see what people responded with. You're going to click on the responses tab, which is on the right side at the very top next to questions. This little green square here with like the little kind of cross in it, this is going to create a spreadsheet with all of your responses in it that then you can view. So click that, and we're just going to do it here. We'd already done it, so I'm just going to show you what the spreadsheet looks like. Go back here. So I already created it. So it's going to just take me to the spreadsheet. When you first create the first time, it's going to ask you to make a name for it and save it. So just make sure you do that. And as you can see here, we have the survey results that people completed. And you can. This is, it's a great way for instead of having to deal with paper lists and having to read people's handwriting. This is a great tool. I mean, we're using it right now for a survey, but you can use this as a sign-in sheet for your group meetings. You can use it as a feedback device, the way that we're using it today. You can use it as a way to have people sign on to sign-on letters. There's a variety of ways you can use this tool. So I just wanted to just demo this for you all. Now that you've seen how to use it and how to collect responses, I'm going to show you really quickly how to create links or how to share the link. So, all right. So you're going to click the send button here, this big purple button. And then this little paper clip, you can either type the email address of people here to send it to them directly, or you can click here in this little paper clip thing here, and that's going to give you a link. So I'm just going to copy this link here. And now to create a short link that's customizable, I'm going to go to bit.ly.com. Now, this is also free to use. What I'm going to do is, the first step is I go here to this button that says create, and I go create link. Now here where this popped up, this square, I'm going to paste my long link in there, and it automatically creates a short link for me. But this still is a little bit hard to remember, right? I'm not going to, if I'm talking to somebody over the phone, I'm not going to be able to say, hey, type in bit.ly/3A capital O W. That's way too confusing. So, you can customize it here, and you can turn it into whatever name you want. So we actually created one earlier that was this, we call it bit.ly/Sierra Online. So as you can see, we just type in bit.ly/Sierra Online, and it takes us directly to the form. I wasn't going to create it there because that link was already taken. That's one thing about it, is that if the short link you're trying to create has already been taken, it won't let you do it, so you have to create something unique. But again, this is a very useful tool for creating links that are easily memorable and that you can share out for people. And you can use it, say you have a popular hashtag you're using, you can make the short link match your hashtag too. So I'll jump back here. And I know I went through a lot of information there, so I'll just pause here for any questions. Okay. All right, so just now, before we hop into the final portion of our seminar, I just wanted to talk a little bit about different outreach methods and highlight what each one is useful for and when you might want to use other ones. So first, we'll talk about phone banking. Most people here probably have some experience with phone banking. Pros for it: you get a chance to have in-person conversations, and all these outreach methods we'll be covering in more in depth how to do them. Just for right now, I just want to touch on the pros and cons so you can think about when you might want to use one of these tactics. So pros, obviously, you have a better chance of engaging people if you can speak to them. You have that human element of voice, that personal connection. It goes a long way. However, as we know nowadays, a lot of people aren't answering their cell phones. It's very hard to reach people through cold calls. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, having the same phone call over and over again can really, really burn people out. So just be mindful of that. If you have a team of people working, phone banking, you might want to reserve it for high priority people you want to call or shorter lists. So for text banking, this is actually my favorite way to outreach. It's the best chance you have of somebody seeing your message. You actually have I think it's a 98% chance of someone opening your text message, as opposed to a 15% chance of them seeing your email or 25% chance of them listening to a voicemail that you left. That was the most recent data I saw. So you have a great chance of somebody seeing your message. The outreach is super quick. Just today, Sierra Club, we texted about 5,000 people today to get this message out for this webinar. So as you can imagine, calling 5,000 people would take a lot longer than texting 5,000 people. So we will be doing a text banking demo later on, but just take it from me as somebody who has to do this a lot. Text banking is the fastest way to get a word out. The only problems with that, though, is that they're not as personal as a call. It's so easy to text people nowadays that it can get very spammy very quickly. You could text people 3 times in a month and not even realize it, and that 4th text you sent them, they're like, please take me off your list. So just be mindful of how much you're texting people. And also, it might not be the appropriate setting for the message. If you're trying to set across a message that's more formal than informal, you might want to use an email or a phone call. So emails, just most of people are familiar with emails. I won't spend too much time on this, but it's easy to send multiple people a message with an email. You can just CC or BCC people on emails. You can send it. It's easy to get a message across with email, whether it's short or long. You don't have character limits the way you do in text messages. And also, it allows the recipient to get to the message when they have time to, which is very useful. Cons, it's easier to ignore. How many of us don't have at least one email in our inbox that has not been opened? I know I have way too many. And similar to text, it doesn't have that human quality of voice and tone that a phone call would. And surprisingly enough, emails can take a lot more energy and time than people would think, especially if you want to craft something that looks good. So just be mindful of all that before you set people up to do outreach a certain way. You want to be mindful of you're using people's time most effectively. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why we need to listen first and act second. This is probably the most important part of the training. All too often I've seen organizers or groups go into areas with all these tools and tactics ready to go, only to fall flat because they didn't do the part of listening first and making sure the community was bought into whatever message they were trying to deliver. So first thing I want to highlight is organizing is about relationships above everything else. If we're not connecting on a personal level with the people that we're trying to organize with, then we're not doing this the right way. When you show up at someone's doorstep to deliver a message, more often than not, they're not going to judge you off of that message. They're going to judge you off of how well they know you and how well they can trust you. So building those relationships with people, one quote that I like to share with people is from Adrienne Maree Brown's book, Emergent Strategy, and it's, we should move at the speed of trust. So if that trust is not built there with people, you cannot expect them to act on any actions that you're asking them for. It is most important that we lead with listening and we build trust first. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of times groups go in without understanding a community's perspective first. It is hugely important that you understand what a community's perspective is first. If you're organizing against a coal plant like we do in Sierra Club sometimes, and you go into a community and you don't realize, well, hey, half of the people in this community are employed by this coal plant, and we're going in there talking about shutting down the coal plant, your message might be received in a different way than you intended it. So again, doing that deep dive, talking with community leaders, doing the research to make sure you're understanding the community's perspective first before you start organizing, and letting that feedback guide you to the issues of most urgency. Don't assume that you know what's best for a community. try to understand where a community is coming at this first, and let them guide you in the way that that you move in your organizing. Leave all of your assumptions at the door. It is hugely important that you understand a community, that you understand the way a community is thinking first, so you can meet people where they're at. And the final point I want to share is about transactional versus transformational organizing. This term comes from the HR world a lot. In HR, when we talk about transactional leadership styles, it's usually people that are very goal-oriented. They're not trying to challenge the systems of power or reshape relationships. Instead, they're trying to get things done and move things as smoothly as possible. That's good for if you have short-term goals, if you're just trying to organize a small group of people, or if you're only trying to organize towards a specific mission that you have already clearly lined out. However, a lot of times our organizing needs to take a transformational tone, because what we're trying to do is actually change the systems of power that we're interacting with. So transformational organizing is less concerned about goals and outcomes in a short term, and is more concerned about building power for a long term and changing the dynamics of power, so that we're better set up in the future to have community leaders and the community itself building that power for itself. So transformational leadership style is more focused on building relationships, on team building, motivating fellow people in your team. It's more about, again, connecting us to our values and moving our values forward, as opposed to looking at performance levels and metrics. We're really mostly concerned about who is getting power in this process, and if it's not the community getting power, then we need to reevaluate ourselves, and we need to do this a little bit differently. So, and again, if you want any more information about transformational versus transactional organizing, this book, Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown, is the ultimate guide, in my opinion, to how to organize correctly. So a little bit more on that subject, though. We're going to have Herman Younger from the Sierra Club presenting on the Hermes principles. So Herman, if you would like to quickly just share your screen.
Yeah, thank you.
We have gone a little bit over time, so if you can just stick with us for about an extra 15 minutes, we promise to get through this as quickly as we can.
All right. Let me know when you see my screen.
Okay. I think
okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Herman Younger. I'm the organizing representative based here in Gainesville, Florida, for the Red Tide and Wildlands campaign. And I want to thank you all for being a part of this call. The Hermes principles truly are the first step to becoming a successful and ethical organizer. With that being said, let's jump in. And I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly. I know we're a little bit over time. So today I'm going to be presenting on the Hermes principles and developing transformational relationships. Brief overview. I'm going to go through the 6 Hermes principles, a history of it, how it relates to the Sierra Club, and then some tips on how to develop transformational relationships. So a brief history. On December 6th through 8th, 1996, 40 people of color and European American representatives met in Hermes, New Mexico for the Working Group Meeting on Globalization and Trade. The Hermes meeting was hosted by the Southwest Network for Environmental and Economic Justice, with the intention of hammering out common understandings between participants from different cultures, politics, and organizations. And the following Hermes principles for democratic organizing were adopted by the participants. Allison Chin, former Sierra Club board president and current board member, who was the co-lead of the Diversity Steering Committee in 2014, said this about the Hermes principles. We need to engage and empower a movement of the size and power required to bring about the changes needed to tackle climate disruption. The principles provide guidance to building community with integrity across difference, culturally, politically, organizationally. So the Hermes principles and how it relates to the environmental movement. The environmental movement for decades has been embedded with racism across many environmental organizations. Unfortunately, many older environmental organizations, including the Sierra Club, were founded with the thought that we must conserve and protect the earth so that white men may enjoy it. This has unfortunately severely hurt our community efforts with Black, Indigenous people of color for years. Thankfully, we've moved far away from that. And this is where the Hermes principles come in, because these guiding principles are a way for these primarily white environmental organizations to engage with Black, Indigenous, people of color in an ethical and transformational way. The GEMES principles were offered as a set to guidance to mainstream mostly white environmental organizations who wanted to work in low-income and people of color communities. And that was a quote from Bob Bingaman, the Sierra Club's National Organizing Director.
Herman, I think you need to share your screen. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
You're fine. You're fine, Herman. I can see your screen.
Okay. So number one, be inclusive. This is moving beyond tokenism. That's not ethical and it's not transformational. So what that means is having inclusivity during planning and decision-making, during staffing and coordination. It cannot be achieved without discussion, hard work, patience, and advanced planning, and there will be conflict. But through the conflict, there will be stronger community relations. It's about building alternative institutions, movement building, and not compromising out in order to be accepted into the anti-globalization club that is a product of colonialism. Number two, emphasis on bottom-up organizing. It is important to reach out to new constituencies, reaching all levels of leadership and membership base of the organizations that are already involved in our network, engaging the frontline communities. And number three, let people speak for themselves. We have to make sure that relevant voices of people directly affected are being heard. This is why we do what we do. It's not so that we may speak, but so that we let those that are being impacted, that it has shown to be Black, Indigenous, people of color that are mostly affected by environmental racism and from climate change, we have to make sure that we let them speak. If that's not possible, we have to provide ways for spokespersons to represent and be responsible to the affected constituencies. Number four, work together in solidarity and mutuality. Groups working on similar issues with compatible visions should consciously act in solidarity, mutuality, and support each other's work. This opens up the possibility for coalition building. Incorporate the goals and values of other groups with your own work in order to build strong relationships, and share your resources with one another. If you have the privilege of being in a strong and well-funded organization, and your partner is a newer and maybe not as well-funded organization, share your resources. And vice versa, you may find yourself in a position where you're needing the aid of other organizations. We're all in this movement together. We have to make sure that we're sharing the resources and our strategies as well. Number five, build just relationships among ourselves. We need to treat each other with justice and respect, both on an individual and organizational level, in this country and across borders. Defining a just relationship is a process. And I want to invite you all to just answer on the comments how you define a just relationship. I'm going to be diving into this, but I'd love to hear what you all think before we get into it. And it must include clarity about decision-making, sharing strategies, and resource distribution. And number six, commitment to self-transformation. As we change societies, we must change from operating on the mode of individualism, which is a transactional relationship, to community-centeredness, transformational relationships. We must walk our talk. We must be values that we say we're struggling for, and we must be justice, we must be peace, and we must be community. So developing transformational relationships. And you know, I'd just like you all to write this in your comments, but I have a couple questions that I'd like to leave you with. What experiences have you had with transactional relationships, transformational relationships? What does building a transformational relationship mean to you? And just briefly going into it, a transactional, I know that Gonzalo already went into it. A transactional relationship is a one-way street. You're looking, what can I get from this relationship with the least amount of effort or resources from your part. A transformational relationship is a two-way street. And you're not there. It's community-centered, as I had mentioned. and there is no hidden motives behind it. That is plainly the definition between a transformational and transactional relationship. A transactional relationship is utilitarian in nature, and it comes from this culture of transactions. And then some tips on how to develop transformational relationships. Be real, be vulnerable, raw, and genuine. Think about the most fruitful relationships that you have in both your professional and personal lives. It doesn't come from the ego, it comes from the self. And it comes from being raw and vulnerable. And that comes with its hiccups. There will be conflict inevitably when you're being your genuine self, because we don't know everything, and there will be ignorance from our part. But from that comes a much powerful relationship. Think about any potential in your personal lives, any potential love interest that you may have. It never comes from having a transactional relationship, right? It always comes from being raw, vulnerable, and egoless. This will create a natural form of trust that can be used as stepping stones of building meaningful connections. And then create protections. Sharing and being comfortable to be real requires feeling protected. Transactional relationships are full of rejections, which ultimately forces the parties to not take risks, don't share, and pander the connection. Creating a protective environment will make you invaluable in the relationships, as that level of trust allows others to go big in their lives. Get uncomfortable. Ask uncomfortable questions that are genuine and make people think and make you truly learn. Asking uncomfortable questions that can't be discussed in a non-protected and transactional environment is a first step, is a first step in the process of creating that safe and protected environment. And I'd just like to conclude and leave you with a couple more questions just to reflect on what we've talked about today. How many of your relationships are transformational? How transformed are you by those relationships? How transformed would the world be? And what are you waiting for? And if you want some more information on just relationships, building them, and on the Hermes principles, please feel free to email me at herman.younger@sierraclub.org. And now I'd like to take this time to see if there's any questions.
I saw some great comments I wanted to highlight. Thank you, Herman, for that.
Of course.
So yeah, Sam saying everyone is, what does a transformational mean? Everyone is accepted and responses from all are necessary. Not being afraid to share power. Thank you for that, William. That's hugely important. Welby, a just relationship is acknowledging both the equality of the individual, as well as acknowledgement of their right to have justice and their right to ask for that justice. That is very poetic. Thank you for that. That is awesome. David S., transactional relationships want something for the originator, but transformational relationships want something for everyone. This is so great. I'm so glad y'all are, really digging this information. It seems like y'all are getting something really powerful out of it. And that's, that's all we really wanted to do, is just share this so that we can empower others and, build the right way together.